Good evening, everyone. It's September 27th, 2022, and the time is now 6:06 p.m. I now call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted via remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. My name is Courtney Kirk. I have been designated co-chair of the Urban Design Commission to open tonight's meeting by Director Sarah Lewis, who I anticipate will be joining us a little late. We will start with a roll call of the commissioners present. Frank Valdez. Absent. Andrew Arbaugh.
Here.
Tim Talon.
Here.
Deborah Fennick.
Here.
Sherry Ruane.
Here.
Tim Hood. Absent. All right. Let's see here. Look at my little notes here. So we have a request from Commissioner Arbaugh to take the civic spaces for 299 Broadway first, taking things out of order from the agenda because he has another meeting that he has to leave to join. So I am willing to accept that request. So if we can start things off with the 299 Broadway civic spaces, if the design and developer members for the civic spaces can please raise their hand so Emily can set all the controls so you can be presenters and speak to us this evening.
All right, give me just one moment, sorry. Whoop.
And good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah, hi, this is Adam Dash. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm getting a bad echo, but I'm not doing the presentation tonight, so that's fine. Others will be doing. Dave Siders here, I assume, on the screen because he is going to be doing the civic space because that is his expertise area and not mine. I don't know who's driving the slides, but
I think this is Tim Love. I think David's going to drive his slides, and then I'll be presenting the building update slides.
even better. All right, Dave, off you go then.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Adam and Tim. Give me 1 second here. See if I can.
While I have, as you're getting things set up, David, just as a reminder to the commissioners, there are specific design guidelines for the two civic space types being reviewed. I am going to drop those in the chat just as a refresher.
Great. And can everyone see my screen now? Does everyone have visuals on my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Looks good, David.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry, I think I lost visuals of all of you, but I will do my best to present. And let me know if you have any questions. Really a pleasure to be back here with you again this evening to share some of our updates to the civic spaces. My name is David Sider. I'm the founding principal and design director at Future Green Studio. I'm a licensed landscape architect in Massachusetts. And today we wanted to just walk through the design package with you, much of which is the same. We did want to address particular comments that we had heard at the last meeting. But overall, the development summary is here, and we're really excited to kind of talk through the specifics of the Pocket Plaza and Pocket Park, as well as some of the conveyances throughout the site overall. Some of the feedback that we heard at the August 23rd UDC, sorry, little touchy. from the last meeting on August 23rd, one thing that we heard was to provide more information on the streetscape sections along Broadway, to review the width and overall quality of the pedestrian walk for Temple Street to the Pocket Park, and some concern over the success of the plaza being over-reliant on retail strategies. Similarly, at the park programming, to just provide more intentionality and justification for the park program. And lastly, to ensure that the Muse is sufficient width and dimensions to function well. So if there's additional questions or comments that come out, please let us know. But these are the particular points that we wanted to address in today's presentation. By means of a broader introduction, I'll try to keep this brief because I think many of people have heard this before. We did look at the overall kind of neighborhood plan and the varieties of public spaces available, and really found that plazas are a typology that's particularly devoid here, where most of the common civic uses were playgrounds and athletic fields. Notably a lack of dog parks and equal lesser representation of performance spaces, as well as some of these other features. Some of the site context here on Broadway, looking east. This, I know Tim is going to talk about this more, but I believe you all know the Liquor Mart here is staying. So our site really starts to the right of that, all along Broadway, along Temple, and then through to Sewell. Here on Broadway, looking west, you see, our site is largely impervious. And so that's one of our overall strategies, is to really look at the porosity of the site as one of our kind of ecological goals. You see that reinforced here. This is the existing Sewell Street basketball court and the future site of the Pocket Park. You see how small it really is. It's roughly 90 feet by 90 feet. And then adjacencies are all, some multifamily, but kind of single building on residential streets, and overall kind of quiet street. Largely the site, has got some pretty good aspect. It's got a lot of south-facing components to it, which will be really nice in terms of getting light into the civic spaces. And then naturally, there's this Desire line that currently cuts through the site that people take to the bus station here on Broadway. Many people, know this, and the parking lot, it is largely impervious. And we wanted to find a way of, keeping some of those site aspects and kind of historical desire lines throughout the neighborhood into the current design. A lot of what we look at in terms of sustainable strategies, a lot of these are kind of implicit to the way that we design, but here's the kind of laundry list of things that we're thinking from a building performance as well as from a landscape performance strategy. I think one of the nice aspects about this is that all the civic spaces are on terra firma, so no parking decks beneath them, which should provide us adequate soil volume with which to grow really mature trees. Part of our analysis just included a little bit of a broader survey of public spaces. You see what we're calling the kind of dumbbell here on the left, the public plaza along Broadway at roughly 7,700 square feet, and then the Pocket Park here along Sewell at 7,200 square feet, and then the connective link of the Muse, which again tracks on that historic Desire line through the site to provide a much more substantial open space of roughly 17,000 square feet.
David, is it possible just to move to new information? I think all of the context stuff has been well covered in previous presentation.
Of course, yep, I can jump through those more quickly. This is one of the new slides that we did introduce. I'm, just giving you a little bit of a sense of some of our past work and the way that we've been able to place make in small scale spaces. A lot of the other references that we've seen in through some of our conversations have been much larger examples of public space. And so we wanted to point out a couple of our projects that have really functioned well in these kind of smaller scale environments, but still to create places that are, for ecology, but also for people, and really look to blend the two in service to the other, that, through a kind of both and strategy lead to better public spaces. You've seen this kind of bookended diagram. This is the updated plaza, updated plan, which we've included some amendments here to the cut through to Temple Street, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. But all of this you've seen in the past, so I'll kind of skip over these larger conceptual approaches. Some of the images for the Civic Plaza, our zoning diagrams, which you've seen, our general program, plan program and bullet points of our kind of design guidelines. And then adding in some more ideas about the types of program that we'd like to see here, and the elements and the kind of features of the kind of plan diagram. So we're thinking about ways that multi-generational play can occur. So elements like ping pong, something we're considering, and then larger kind of civic seating moments through either swings of some kind or larger platform benches. These kind of strategies we find, along with movable furniture, give people like a greater sense of ownership of space. They're also not kind of hierarchical in a way that's kind of formal, that makes people feel like they don't belong in a space. You're really meant to kind of sit up here cross-legged, or kind of lay back, and really encourages people to utilize the space in a different way. And then integrating moments of art that also might be playable. So it's not just a kind of stodgy historic, or a sculpture, but something else that becomes interactive and something for the younger population of people. And then, we like to do these kind of programmatic test fits. So the top 3 diagrams are kind of events that we're looking to do, these kind of like heat mappings to show how the space might function during different times, or different days, or different events throughout the year. So here on the left, the weekday lunchtime, looking at the kind of retail spill out that can happen at the edges, and then the really activated interior through the stacked seating moments, the movable tables, the overhead lighting that creates a real destination and space, and then the moments of conveyance. So our kind of cut through the plaza here that gives us our at-grade crossing and non-ADA kind of, our ADA accessible route. And then here, the ability for a weekend market to take over the space. You can see how these stalls kind of begin to fit out, 10 by 10 stalls, even food trucks that might be able to line up along Broadway and further kind of activate the plaza. And then even a small scale performance. Again, this is, I believe, roughly 80 by 80 at the plaza. So, not huge as a public space, but enough to accommodate a smaller scale program where you could set up a movable stage and have people really congregating at the edges on some of the built-in furniture elements and movable furniture elements available. Our view, which you've seen here, are images of the Muse. And I think a lot of this, we're still kind of in development, but really open, keeping open, again, these kind of open sight lines, seating moments, lushness, and kind of clarity of kind of vision throughout the space. And then as we jump to Sewell Street Park, we've updated a couple of these images, specifically the stacked seating and plantings, which we think gives a real nice sense of the scale of the space, and I think the quality that the space might be able to offer. We know we have quite a bit of grade change to contend with there. And so how can we create things that both provide hardscaped areas for people to congregate and gather in a kind of low maintenance, resilient way, but lush edges that feather in to really provide canopy and buffer from adjacent neighbors, but a real destination of a public space. that are playful and dynamic to allow for different events to come throughout the year. We also looked back at just some other park scale comparisons. A number of people have mentioned just really these exemplary public spaces in the neighborhood. And so, looking at Hoyt Sullivan Playground, Luann David Park specifically as both kind of smaller scale examples, you'll see they are still roughly 3 to 4 times our site. So we are certainly limited, I think, by the footprint that we have to kind of operate with there. But I think there are a lot of great examples that we can pull from all 3 of these really successful projects. As we're flipping through the plan here, we wanted to really highlight a couple of new images, thinking about these kind of sculptural elements that are also playful. That's kind of how we like to design play spaces. I mean, I think if you're thinking about Hoyt and Sullivan, this is kind of like almost like a playground as a single use. We wanted to think about a landscape that could be played upon, but really accessible and open for everyone. So that, again, intergenerationally, people would feel really comfortable going there, even if you don't have kids, but something that can be experienced and experiential kind of in its scope, and kind of check some of the other boxes on native plants and these kind of lushness that people are looking, some of the community members have mentioned being important to the project. And then looking in where we do need to use retaining walls, like how can we do so in a kind of less carbon intensive way? I mean, I think places that will probably use some concrete retaining walls, but we'd love to use gabions, things that could be filled with natural stone and have a kind of lighter touch on the landscape. Similarly to the plaza, we looked at really highlighting a couple of the programmatic features that we felt like could occur here, and that the ownership would be looking to allow to kind of occur and support through the project. So thinking about the kind of weekday lunchtime, how that might be really kind of taken over by a younger set of people, but that could be activated through blankets on the lawn and the kind of interactive moments at the edges for nature type play. The summer cinema series, think about a couple of evenings throughout the summer, being able to hold a kind of pop-up screen and movie night, or even a small scale talk or lecture about particular topics. So it really becomes a civic meeting space where ideas and entertainment can be shared. And then it's got that flexible capacity to hold different programs. Thinking about just focus on kind of fitness and the ability for that to really hold, here up to, roughly, I want to say like 20 or so yoga mats.
Just a quick comment that one of those diagrams has people moving in and out between the community room and the park. The community room, as we mentioned last time, only has access from that door from the exterior. So it's considered part of the public realm. And so indoor, outdoor programming possibilities is something else that I'll be talking about a little bit too.
That's wonderful, Tim. I meant to highlight that. I think what we really wanted to do, if I went back to our site diagram, is to provide this conveyance through the site to Sewell to the Muse. But what that does is then it kind of allows us to accommodate the grade change here and open up a lot of this to being flat and level, so that people can really congregate there, and that becomes our soft surface. But then it also allows us up here to create almost this plaza-like moment outside the community center. So again, as Tim was saying, we can have a great kind of interior-exterior relationship there, and have that function almost as a connected but separate space. And then this kind of updated view, standing at that kind of Sewell Street entrance, looking towards the Muse here in the distance. You see some of our built-in seating here in the right, bike racks in the foreground, this kind of lush planting wrapping around the edges, our natural play element, a kind of a mural outside the community room, which kind of beckons you into the space and connects you back to that Temple Street passage. And then our grade change, which we're imagining kind of interplanted with trees and ground cover and perennials, which cascade down to create these kind of softer moments, and then larger kind of landscape buffers at the edges. We also want to address the Temple Street passage, comment. I think we probably didn't do a good enough job of articulating the scale of the passage as it's been designed. So we just wanted to take a step back and make sure we kind of understood what we were designing here. And so we looked at some of these great examples, Elmhurst Alley here on the left in Philadelphia. The actual passageway itself is only 7 feet, but with some additional planting on each side up to 14 feet. And then these other treatments of lighting and maybe trellises that can provide these kind of connective links to help kind of guide people down that space.
David, I'm going to give you a 3-minute warning here.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I'm talking so much. I'll try to wrap this up. What we did do here in the plan was widen and kind of splay these edges, and I think Tim is going to talk about this a little bit as well. But at the community room, we didn't touch the building here, but just kind of opened up the landscape edge here, and then provided that kind of mural opportunity, and then splayed this building A edge opening as well to create a little bit more welcoming sense there. But we actually broke and narrowed the pathway down a little bit to get that planting on both sides, which we feel like is important to making that a real essential corridor. And so you see those highlighted changes here, the building A widening, the landscape widening in response to the community room here, and then the addition of the mural wall. Overall, we're looking to have a 7-foot wide conveyance, which really is substantial enough for 2 strollers or 2 people with bikes to pass one another. And then a rendering of that connection and open space. You see the lighting moment and the kind of landscaped corridor. Again, there is quite a bit grade change there, but we're looking to kind of soften that entry as much as possible, and it can again provide that connective link. Along Broadway, we wanted to address the streetscapes questions. You can see there is quite a bit of grade change all along Broadway, so something that we are really contending with and thinking through how to best address. But here at section A, we've got a roughly 14-foot wide overall sidewalk condition. Here at section B, we're up to almost 28 feet. So that gives us a little bit more of a substantial buffer to get in some rainwater or other type of garden. I think largely you've seen the rest of this information as well. So perhaps that is a good place to stop.
Thanks, David. Just since we have a short amount of time and a lot of things to accomplish with the civic spaces, I want to open up to the commissioners any questions that are specific about the Pocket Plaza.
It would be helpful just to, as you're talking through them, just to have that graphic on the screen, if that's at all possible. Thanks.
Can you share the plans, David? Yeah.
Yes, apologies.
Whoa. What the heck?
Is everyone able to see that?
We only see the title slide.
Okay. Which should I bring up the overall plan?
The plan of the civic space, I think, is what Sherry was asking for.
Thank
Civic
you.
Plaza. Keep on going.
Great, sorry about that.
David, can you go to the Civic Plaza close in? Yeah, there.
Perfect. Thank you. One question I had that I'm just curious about, and I did watch the recording from the last hearing. Who is responsible for the ongoing maintenance here? Is it the developer?
It's the developer, yeah.
That's correct.
I have a question. Could you talk a little about the outside corner of Building A, adjacent to the retail space? Yes, yeah, that planted area.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can talk about it from a grading standpoint first. The plaza is at level 33, but the Broadway sidewalk is tilted pretty dramatically. And so the way we're solving that is with stairs down to 33 on the uphill side, a wart plane in the middle where the paving pattern changes, which comes down at less than a 5% slope and lands pretty quickly, and then slipping in directly into level 33 at the bottom. So we have 3 different techniques to bring people relatively naturally into a single plaza level. And that partly was programmatic and partly driven by our discussions with Jesse at Graffito about getting that relationship between the spill out spaces across the plaza. He thought that was important from a kind of placemaking standpoint.
There's also, I believe, Tim, a large existing honey locust tree where if you can see my mouse here at the corner of Building A, that we were trying to preserve at this point. We'll have to certainly see as we get into the particular elements of grading and the building going adjacent, whether that can indeed be preserved, but that's our intention.
And so that outer line is the curb line. Do you happen to know what that dimension is between the planted area and the curb?
I don't offhand, but I can make sure to get that for you.
The central plaza is clearly paver, and it looks like there's wood happening along the adjacency. Is the patterning that is the sort of squarish, is that also intended to be paver, or is that intended to be concrete scored in some way?
I think we haven't delved into the specific materiality yet of these different elements. The wood that you're seeing here are furniture elements that we would like to see kind of as built-in features. And then we're still studying the 2, specific paving materials, but the intention is to create a kind of island in the center that then gets kind of wrapped with another material that connects all of the different building parcels together.
And that's the same material that would run down the Muse to
Exactly.
suggest that extension to the park on the other end.
Exactly.
So the wood is at grade and flush?
The wood is raised as a seating element, either a bench, a built-in bench, or a platform bench.
So moving from Broadway through the space, is the white band at the back of the gray running bond, is that raised as well? So you can't move directly through, so the accessible route is, sorry, walk me through that part.
No, that is just a flush curb. And so that is meant just to kind of be a band around the interior planting, interior paving island.
Okay.
So yeah, there's accessible routes through here and through here.
Any other questions? If not, we can move into any design comments.
I can start. I think on the plaza, I don't have sort of huge major issues with the plaza. The precedent is Bow Market. I think that's pretty clear. It would be great. I would say the only sort of thing that I would, I guess, encourage you guys to do is it feels like the precedent as Bow Market is very, very clearly applied. And it would be great to see sort of what the next generation of Bow Market is, because this feels very, very close to what we already have elsewhere in the city. And then the connection to the curb and sort of all of the streetscape, it needs to be thought of together. Like right now, we just sort of, we hit the property line and we go to white, and that needs to be reconciled. And that's going to be a comment that I'll have all the way around the property.
Good point. Yeah, we can make sure to better depict that and the level of detail and thought we put into some of those streetscape elements. And I think, good point noted about Bow Market. I mean, I think one of the things that we do want to do here is make sure it's really accessible for everyone and feels inviting for everyone. So I think that is something that comes in and I think is representative in a lot of our other work that has been built as well, is a general sense of inclusivity and informality, so that people really everyone feels comfortable in those spaces.
Sorry, one more question. The white box to the southeast that's on the sidewalk, is that another tree opportunity for a street tree? What is that?
Bus shelter.
It might be a carryover of the existing bus shelter, which we're going to move up against Building A.
Great. Okay.
I think is that what that is? Is it a CAD ghost, David?
I think it might be. Yeah, apologies. I think that's an error on our graphic part. Apologies.
Okay.
And I guess I'll just jump in because I do have to leave in like 5 or 6 minutes. Just sort of jumping back to the streetscape, just as this progressive and is going to the ZBA, just we need way more information on the streetscape in terms of an idea about what the tree spacing is going to be. The sections I appreciate having the sections as a first start, but we need more of them. It's not incredibly clear what the planting, I guess, strategy is from this section, if this is a rain garden or not. Those are big streetscapes too, and there's the opportunity to use them as public space that is programmed and defined and it really is pocket parks in their own right, especially in places where they're going to be adjacent to public transit pickups. And I'd also follow up that the streetscape on Temple is just as important. So it needs to have a greater level of detail. From this, I don't know if we have a pavered furnishing strip. I don't know if we have furnishings. I don't know anything about kind of what the character of that streetscape is based on these two sections, and that really needs to be delved into with much more detail as this moves to ZPA.
Those are, just so you know, Andrew, those are things that are being worked out in partnership with the city, because we're off the property line into the public right of way. And, we covered that at the last meeting about curb management decisions, loading zones. And we have a follow-up meeting with mobility on October 12th to work through all of those things.
Understood. I just prepping for ZBA because we have seen similar 40Bs projects go through, and those were the questions that were asked as part of that process. So having that really clearly defined as you go into that is going to save a lot of time in the long run. And having an opinion, I guess, as a design team as to what should be the streetscape as you work with mobility and as you work with the ZBA would be incredibly helpful for those bodies as well as the community.
Absolutely. I think that's a really fair point. And I think to Tim's comment, I think we are working towards that. I mean, I do think along Broadway, we do understand that as it gets towards this kind of B section, there might be opportunities for smaller, occupation of these spaces and pocket parks, and then other landscape performance measures. But that's something that we're still kind of working through. Certainly as a grade change along Broadway, it's going to make those sittable moments kind of more intermittent. But that is something we will work on and look to provide more information on soon.
Commissioner Arbaugh, while we have you still, I mean, do you have any specific comments about the pocket park?
About the pocket park, the plaza space.
Sewell Street Park.
Yes. like I said, I think in terms of what we saw last time, I think the grading is done very, very well. I think there's sort of no question there, and that's a huge compliment because it's a lot. The site is a challenge from a grading standpoint. I would say, like in the presentation, I didn't find the precedent parks super helpful. I think it would be great to see precedent parks that are of a similar scale. I kind of understand that this is not Lincoln Park, and so having a better idea of what this can be instead of what this isn't would be really helpful. I think that the point that gets made here, honestly, is kind of the opposite of what you want to make it. It's making the point that this is very little public space for the scale of the development. I don't think that's what you want to say. I think it also.
We're just trying to say it's a small space to pack in a lot of programming, I think was the
piece that I would challenge you is I'd rather do one thing real well than kind of try to do 40 things kind of and that's where I feel a little struggle on that. I think your test fits on the plaza on the other side were great and super helpful, and I believe those 100%. I don't believe for a second that weekday lunchtime on Sewell Street is ever going to get that volume of people. Like, it's just, this is not Post Office Square. But to me, like the test fits that I'm seeing here don't speak to believable uses for this park. And the yoga class, to me, even sort of skews towards an agent of gentrification in the community, which I don't think that this wants to be that either. So I still think that there's further development on this park with PSEF to nail what the program really should be and could be in a way that is a true community asset. And then again, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to like pile on in like 5 seconds and then blow out of here.
No, it's okay. No problem.
Can we go back to the little cut through over to Temple Street?
Yes.
I think the cut through to Temple Street is really where my materiality question as to what that paving comes from, because the precedent images are very lovely. But what I'm looking at this plan, if I'm to kind of look at it critically, is that's a concrete ramp that's maxed out. So I don't find those precedent images to be very helpful or super believable. I think this is a concrete ramp. And I think there's a question as to whether you're really getting that green sliver in between there, or else you need a retaining wall to help adjust for the grade with a neighbor. There's just a level of question that I think that if there's a level of uncertainty still left in here, and a section would be a section would be super helpful, which I think we asked for last time too, to understand if you actually have room for that planting strip, if you need a wall, knowing that is 8.33. There are railings that are going to be set in that are going to take that 7 foot and shrink it down so that it is not 7 foot. It's probably 6 foot. And again, like it's rendered like it's rendered like it's not a concrete ramp, and it is. So we kind of need to see what that really is like. And that's it. I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry.
No, we appreciate your comments there, and certainly we could do a little bit better job on the graphics. Apologies for that. I think as we get into more detail, yes, we will make sure to resolve some of these widths. I mean, I do think even at 6'6" or something, I do think that is appropriate for this type of path width. Is there any?
Well, we need a section to see that, because those precedent images don't reflect the context that's on this plan. And I appreciate that, like it feels like we've got more space, but yeah, like that's not a ramp, none of those. So those aren't ramp and those aren't concrete, those are pavers, and these are lovely. I would love all of these. Like if that space could be this, that's great, but I'm not convinced yet that space is this.
Yeah, the ramp is just something, unfortunately, that's the only solution to kind of get people from point A to point B. We've got 11-foot grade change, and we want to make sure it kind of starts to level out as we get to the community room.
Yeah, which I understand. We just need to own that if that's what it is, then we need to own and understand that.
Sure.
So sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So since we have 5 minutes to also cover Sewell and take a vote on 2 spaces, commissioners, do you have any questions, comments about the Sewell Pocket Park?
Yeah, I guess the one comment and I guess one challenge I see with your intentions and Tim, you know, this involves you, is the community room in the space and the connectivity of the community space and the space outside of it, because the space outside of it feels very much like, you know, a highway, not a highway, you know, a throughway, you know, and so there's no, maybe, I don't know what the solution is for that corner. But, you know, you sort of want, I like the idea that there is some, you know, relationship between.
Deborah, I think you went quiet on us.
Yeah, Deborah, your audio cut out.
Uh-oh. Oh, I'm just, so I think I like the aspiration of this to connect the community room and the park. And so I'm interested in seeing how that develops, because I do think that's important. I think it doesn't want to be, you know, a building just defining an edge, but rather, you know, something that feels connected. And
I think you're suggesting a little bit more of a place there and not just residual space between paths. Yeah, we can work on that, because I think it's tied to how what material we use for the path coming down from Temple Street and how we maybe define that as a different material, so there's a sense of arrival too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think the Andrew's comments and your comment are probably linked. And it might mean that we make some slight geometric adjustments to the organic amphitheater, so it's also more responsive to the edges of the community room. Maybe there's some geometric fine tuning we can do.
Sounds good.
Building on what Andrew was talking about the scale of the space, I think there are a lot of really nice ideas, a lot of great precedent images, and to the left on this slide, design goals for the space about what it could be. But given its scale, there is going to be, just by necessity, there's going to be an editing and a selected process to choose what it actually is in the space. I guess I'd encourage you really to think about, for this space especially, thinking about programming it for children, not just young, and you know, maybe I'm biased because I just had a child next to me, but children for a range of ages. I think, especially given the type of units that are in this building or in these buildings. Cambridge did a study in 2018-19 looking at the occupancy of its affordable housing units and how many children were living in them for 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, and looking at those ratios and the units count, the unit mixes for these buildings. I did a rough calculation, and it's something like you could expect to have 110 children living in building A and 130 children between both buildings, and that's a lot of children to have on site. So I think providing them with outdoor space that is usable, oriented them, will be important.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna jump onto what Tim was saying on the sort of what is starting to hint at play in a more natural, sort of integrated into the landscape. I like the idea of this episodic play schematic and how that can be integrated. I would definitely, as you develop this, encourage you to think about how all kids will move through this and the fine line between attractive nuisance and sort of adventure exploratory experience. And also, again, there's a fine balance between having a strong design language and then having enough variety to make it interesting and discoverable over time. And Tim, I actually was thinking about that study in this possibility of like, so just say there's even 80 kids that are in close proximity any time after school. And I do feel like it wants to be more, I think it does want to be more kid focus driven, can still be multi-generational, but the surfacing and the materiality is going to be critical to keep it lasting under sort of abusive relationship conditions with kids. So yeah, so I think that the ideas are good. And I also wonder about the terraced, can you go back to the rendering actually? And I know we're 1 minute over, Courtney. Yeah, so I wonder about the terraces, and is there a way to have sort of a continuous way to move through them if you are, if you don't want to step upstairs? If you are older with a walker and you just want to move through and sit in the middle, is there a way to do that in a way that also becomes this sort of fun route to run? And yeah, I get that you can go around, and then I wonder about it. Is the terracing yet another opportunity for sort of this sneaky multi-generational opportunity?
You mean with like a zigzag ramp or something, Sherry?
Yeah.
That you look at a 5% slope even in the grain of the seating somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely
That's a nice
something we
idea.
can consider.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, the basic diagram is driven by like solving the grading, and we said, oh, we have a clearing, that we have a flat place, that's cool. And then we looked at a couple of ways to, because that's a varying grade along that edge, right? Because it kind of meets the sidewalk and then it has to step up. But I think we can look at that for sure.
I think there's creative ways to make everything, and kids will play on pretty much anything. I think there are creative ways to make this feel like an enduring playscape, so that maybe it's not these prolific perennial beds, but it's nodes of planting that are meaningful, but you're expecting that kids are going to run through in certain directions, and that's okay. And maybe it's even, some of those just develop organically, but I do feel like the intent is strong, and that it's the details will elevate this well beyond sort of,
I mean, just so we're clear, because I know we have to move on to the building update, that there would be like kind of minor desire lines through the open space that would be part of the discovery agenda of the park.
That's right. You got
Okay.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, that we've tried to strike that balance. Our project at Brooklyn Children's Museum, obviously has got a huge density of kids that kind of come in and overlay onto the landscape. And so we've definitely had some lessons learned from that in terms of types of material and, how to situate some of those walkable elements within the planting beds so they can be still successful over time. But I think that's a really good comment.
It's interesting, thinking about Andrew's comment about this might be a quieter park. There are some in the public space and urban forestry group at the city that thinks that all of those little red people in David's diagrams are actually going to show up. So those were partly in response to city feedback that we weren't designing a park that could accept crowds like that. So I think we want an open space that works when it's this busy, and an open space that's great when there's two families there with their kids.
Right.
Are there other programs here that we're missing that you guys think would be really, well situated here?
Yeah, I think, some of it will rely on what the developer is willing to facilitate. Movie nights don't just happen. There's a lot that goes into it. So I guess and that's a lunchtime scenario on the left. What are those are picnic blankets, the orange picnic blankets?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Summer, when school's out.
Right.
I think one thing could be birthday parties. The play space at Lincoln Park is full every weekend. Same at Prospect Hill Park, of families there having birthday parties in a nice way.
Amazing precedent. Really appreciate that you picked it.
Yeah, I mean, all of our parks, there's a heavy permits approved for birthday parties, anyone parties,
Yeah.
parties, and they need
Almost like-
tables and an
Exactly, like
area and want to hang
community
balloons and
Yeah.
Great.
The big sort of community table that is awesome for a 10 or 12 person birthday party, but also 2 groups of 4 end up sitting at either end. And I think there's a lot to that. The only other thing I would add is there's been a lot of popularity around providing a venue for people to bring BYOH, bring your own hammock, and it's simple infrastructure, but the poles at Lincoln Park are often like double-decker hammocked for weekends. I have a photo of a triple-decker hammock.
That's a cool idea.
You had a precedent image of
Okay.
the swings too. It seems kind of, I seen that before. It seems kind of gimmicky. They put it installed it in the seaport, and I swear every time I go by, there's not a single swing available. People love it.
if I might plug the small scale, it's not a full-on merry-go-round, like a spinning dish. We just put one in front of the central library, and it is a magnet for high school kids, because it's not quite like playground, and there are 90-year-olds that want to sit there and just sort of spin. So
Yeah, I think
I'm
the
a big fan of
episodic, the episodic multi-generational mindset of what could be deployed across this site, I do feel like the potential is really significant.
And just
Wonderful.
one thing we didn't talk about was bike racks and bike parking in the space, but I think that'll be important at all the entry points, both on Broadway and on Seawall,
Absolutely.
where people are coming by bike.
Great.
Okay, well, seeing that I know we're a little over, I would like to ask the commission if they are prepared to make any motions to vote on the Pocket Park and the Pocket Plaza.
So just one of the things that we've on other projects where I think we've seen a range of how the streetscapes are addressed. On some projects, we see it highly developed all the way to the curb. On other projects, we see that as something that's still being worked out together with the city. And I think in this case, it's the latter. We're not reviewing the streetscapes. I think it's important that we, I think as we have on other projects, just take a vote specifically noting that Urban Design Commission has not reviewed streetscapes, is not providing.
Tim, just one other issue about that is in the negotiations between the city and the development team, because there's a very large affordable housing component to this project. It's how much the developer is going to be obligated to finance that work versus provide design direction for the city. And so that's why it's more complicated than a larger development project or a smaller one, because those are things that are going to take more time to get worked out with the city team.
Thank you. That's very helpful context. I think it is important, like, as Andrew mentioned, to really understand kind of what we're evaluating as the broader urban design, but to understand that even the siting of buildings, are they sited properly to provide a comfortable pedestrian roam? Now, I would really like to see continuous spacing of street trees, including across the park, the public space, where it doesn't seem like there's anything that would interfere with providing a planting strip at the curb there, but a continuous spacing of trees at the curb. I'm a little worried, one thing we haven't talked about is the bus stop against the building. What is that condition there? If there's a bus shelter against the building, are people walking in front of it? What's the distance between the curb and that? Is there enough space? Is it comfortable? Do we need those type of things? So I think that's a whole nother level.
Okay. Once again, do I have any motions? Are you prepared? Are you ready? Is it helpful if we just start with the Pocket Plaza as a focus?
So our votes are for each civic space. We are taking a vote to
Yes,
recommend
I need,
compliance with the design
so
guidelines. and
what
Incorporate.
what I need for the Pocket Plaza is a vote that this project has met the design guidelines as outlined in the Somerville zoning ordinance for a Pocket Plaza. And then a vote to adopt any recommendations that you all have provided this evening. And then the same scenario for a vote that the design guidelines for a pocket park have been met, and a vote on the guidelines that you all have given tonight for a pocket park or pocket plaza, pocket park. I'm going to get those mixed up. So this is where. Did you guys have do you want to see a visual, or how can I assist you?
I'll move that the design guidelines for a pocket plaza have been satisfied.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Okay, so just I'm in my brain here, we're doing the Pocket Plaza, so I don't mess up this officialness of things. All right. So I have a motion that the 299 Broadway has met the design guidelines for a pocket plaza, seconded by Deborah Fennick. Roll call vote. Andrew Arbaugh, who had to leave the meeting, so he is not voting. Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
All right. Design guidelines for a pocket plaza have been met. In terms of design guidelines for the pocket plaza, I feel like what I heard is that you all are advising this team to look more in depth at the streetscape and the connection of the plaza to the streetscape, and just specifically around the public realm uses, and thinking about Broadway. It's a very large street, so how can the public realm be sort of expanded along that edge? That there was some comments about the precedents not quite fitting, but that there should be a little bit more information about how the space is utilized, or like how the next version of the precedents. I'll put it that way. I'm just gonna, in my notes I put Bow Market 2.0. Let's see here. I feel like that was most of the comments about the plaza. Do you guys have anything specific that I'm missing?
The suggestion, I know this is related to the streetscape, but the continuous row of street trees be provided across the frontage.
Yes, completing the street as much as possible. Anything else? All right. Do I have a motion for this project to adopt the design recommendations for the Pocket Plaza?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right. I have a motion made by Sherry, seconded by Deborah Fennick. Roll call vote. Tim Talon.
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
Okay, we have voted that for this project on the extra design recommendations for the Pocket Plaza. If we go to the Pocket Park, do I have a motion that the design guidelines for a Pocket Park have been met?
So moved.
Do I
Second.
have a second?
Second?
All right, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote that the design guidelines for a pocket park have been satisfied. Motion by Tim Talon, seconded by Deborah Finnick. Roll call vote. Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Finnick,
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
All right. If I can summarize the design, additional design comments from you all. It sounds like, again, perhaps the precedents weren't quite so helpful in showing what is actually possible, since it is a very small space. So just some questions raised about the validity of what can actually happen in this 7,000 square feet. Let's see here. Perhaps some additional thought around the program and that it is more fitting for the neighborhood, not realizing that it might not be a lunchtime crowd, but more sort of after school crowd, that yoga might not be the best example to use for this particular park.
But
and that
birthday
they're
party.
really, yeah, birthday parties.
Birthday parties, not yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just the realization that the space might be used by a significant number of children. That's lots of feet. That's lots of wear and tear. So really, really focusing some thoughtful design in that direction. That there's more development to connect the community room to the pocket park. And that there can be a lot of symbiotic relationships between the two spaces, and that the terraces are a missed opportunity to perhaps infuse some more program, or also allowing a further range of accessibility to all areas of the park. And just, think about the edge conditions again, the streetscape along Sewell and that little alley, that there's also thought about bike parking and additional things that might need to happen towards the entrances. Does that sound fair to you all? All right.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to adopt the design recommendations given this evening for the pocket park?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Deborah Finnick.
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
Great. All right. That concludes the voting required for the civic spaces of 299 Broadway. Thank you very much, applicant, and we can transition to the building team if more people need to be promoted on the back end of things. Yes,
Can
Deborah.
you? Oh,
Quick question, the Muse is not considered a part of the public room?
So I think that's an interesting question. And as far as I personally have been thinking about the votes, is that it's kind of like the public space affiliated with the buildings. So I don't know, Sarah, Emily, I mean, I might be interpreting that wrong, but we could also make space to take some design recommendations for the Muse specifically.
I think part of the issue, Deborah, is there is no typology in the code that aligns with the Muse. And so there aren't guidelines to use to judge its compliance. And so
No, I was just curious. I don't want to be pushing on that, but.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question.
I'm just trying to understand.
Ooh, Sarah, you have your cartoon voice tonight.
But Tim Love, I want you to rest assured, we don't need guidelines to be judgy. We can just.
Oh, I understand, and if feedback on the Muse would be welcome too. That was the one element, open space element, Sherry, that we talked about, maybe more ironically than the civic space in the park last time. So it was a source of fascination.
Yes, yes. What is the impetus behind calling it the Muse? I don't think I picked
I
that
think
up.
its origins might be Jeff Speck.
Okay.
Putting it bluntly. And I think, Sherry, because you weren't at the previous meeting, there are a series of individual unit entries along it that only have access from the Muse. There's a planting buffer, and then each of those units have a 6-foot deep terrace that's more for them. So it's a layering of 8 to 11 foot path that oscillates a little bit, trees on both sides. And then there's a kind of double threshold to the front door, so the people who live there don't feel like they're right on the pathway system. That's a quick overview. I don't know if the other commissioners think I did a good job of giving Sherry the short story.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. I apologize for interrupting. If the commission does have any comments about the Muse, we can certainly incorporate that into the commission's decision. It doesn't have to be tied to a specific typology.
Yeah, I'm not sure we got a presentation of it, or any more description of it than we had last time. But yeah, I was just curious because it felt public realm. But Tim, I understand the comment. And was it Jeff Speck or was it Richard Sennett that coined that phrase? Anyway.
The origin, I don't know.
Can we do a chipmunk check?
You sound regular.
Okay, good.
All right, well, Commission, did you want to take any design guideline votes or design recommendations on the Muse, or would you like to fold that into the building commentary?
I think we should fold it into the building commentary. Every building needs a little landscape in its life.
Well said.
My only comment would be, I don't know if David's still with us.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so David, we might come if I don't totally exhaust them, Mimi and me, with the rest of the presentation, we might pull the Muse plan back up again.
That sounds good.
Okay, building team, are you ready?
I'm ready, and we need to also let Mimi Love also into our group here. And then I need to share my screen somehow. Do I need to be given permission, Emily, to do that?
I apologize, my camera is not a mirror image anymore in GoToMeetings. Yes, you should have the ability to share your screen, and I believe that Mimi is now a panelist, so she should be able to.
Are you seeing yourselves? Is that the problem?
I'm seeing myself not in a mirror image, but as.
Okay, I need to slide the show, I guess, to the monitor where I can see. So let me. Now it's not letting me.
We just see your go-to screen.
Okay.
Yeah, now we see. Yeah, you pulled
the
things over.
Okay, let me do a little rearranging here. Let me move you to the other monitor. Okay, let me know when you can see. Can you see?
You're good.
We can see.
Great. So we're going to cover the 4 things you see here in the agenda. There were some questions about whether we were meeting the outdoor amenity space number. I'll have a quick slide for that. The commission did vote on the facades and the massing last time with conditions. And so really items number 2 and 3 are, let's say, evidence that we did what you told us to. And then we would love to get 2 waiver endorsements from you because they're issues that we discussed and you recommended that means that we have to have waivers. So we'll talk about that too. This is the overall site plan again. The spaces that we didn't talk about with David, including the Muse, are these 2 courtyard spaces. These courtyards are meant to be amenities for building A and building B. They have kind of semi-public program that face them, the community room in building A and different amenity spaces in building B. And this came up with one of the commissioners last time. We have more than the required 24 square feet per dwelling unit in building A and building B, approximately 30 to 35% more in both cases. So that's the calculation there. But this is just a direct response to a question that came up in the last meeting we had with you. We're going to move on to the conditions. It was feedback, but as conditions to the same kind of vote we just had for the civic spaces. So I'm going to provide an overview of what we heard, kind of tee this up, and then Mimi's going to go through some of the design changes. This won't mean anything to Sherry, but the commissioners liked the materiality of option 1 and the massing of option 3. And by the massing of option 3, that's item number 2, where we raised the step back up on one part of building A, so that step back moved from the 4th floor to the 5th floor. There were some comments that the front door for building A on Temple Street was underdeveloped a little bit. It wasn't quite legible as an entrance. You'll see how we address that. There were some discussions about, I don't know why a commissioner called it the nub, but there's a 3-story mass along Temple Street. Really, you saw a preview of that perspective because David showed it as the building steps down towards the buildings along Temple Street. We made some adjustments to that massing. We've already talked about the Temple Sewell Street connection, but we'll talk about the architectural moves we made to help make that work better. And we've done some work on the corner treatments of certain areas of the building, and then study more moments of boldness, which was a little bit open-ended, but we've got something to show you to think if it's bold or not. So those are the topics. Just an overview. This is a summary and this aerial axonometric view of the materiality of option A, the massing of option 3 from last time, adjustments to the massing along Temple Street so that building that steps down is actually bigger. You see the canopy on the entry, which is now in the center of that mass along Temple Street, and some other things that we're going to focus in on. And then just the Broadway elevation, we're happy you endorsed raising the step back because now there's a kind of natural stepping up of the cornice lines here along the street frontage. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mimi to dive in and discuss some of the issues.
Great. All right. Well, this is building A. Some of the changes are the overall massing. We increased the height of that step back to happen at the 6th level. We, at the 5th level and set back at the 6th, we changed the material. So you're seeing red brick. And the other thing that I just want to call attention to is the corner condition. This is something that was raised in conversation, and we definitely think it's a defining moment right at that Civic Plaza. So there is a corner condition that matches what you're seeing in this elevation on the east elevation. I'm going to walk you counterclockwise. The little diagram you can see up in the upper right-hand corner shows you how we're going to walk. We are going to take you to Temple Street next. Tim, you can go ahead and go to the perspective view. So this is an update of the materiality and the massing. So this is at the corner of Temple and Broadway. You can see the stepping down of the volumes along Broadway and can really notice the grade change there. We do have, for the moment, the corner condition. So that's what we're seeing in the foreground, the Winter Hill Liquor Market. And then we're wrapping around on Temple Street, where the main entrance of building A faces Temple Street. We changed the massing, we updated the materiality to your preferred material palette. And then we have a little bit of a change with the end condition of the massing, which we want to denub the nub, and hopefully you'll see that better in the next slide, which is the elevation. So changes that we made here is the material palette. So we've gone back to the cement board panels for the body of building A. We really worked on the entry to building A. I think it was a lot more regular rhythm the last time you saw it. We added a canopy, we extended the storefront at the entrance. I think it's clearly identified as an entrance, but we still have natural daylight going into the adjacent spaces. The massing change we really think was a great recommendation. I think it does change the proportion of the volume that steps down that was formerly called the nub. I think the massing works better to make it compositionally tie into the rest of the volume. We also updated the palette, and this is something that we just, in looking at this elevation, we just thought complementing that corner building with a green color, which you'll even see in the next image, really starts to address that condition going down to Sewell Park. So this is that really important condition where we've been talking about the narrowness, the slope of Temple Street down to Sewell Park. You can kind of see the landscape and how we're addressing that grade change. But architecturally, we changed the material too at that condition too. We inflected the unit at the ground floor to create a little bit more openness at the ground floor, and making a more inviting entrance. And I'll just call out in this rendering too, you can see the improvement of the entry condition, the main entrance to the building. So this is now looking back at building A with our back against Sewell Park. So you can see the grade change. You can see that corner condition we did at the lower volume there. We did add a moment of surprise at the community room where we're proposing some kind of mural or something that really starts to connect and activate the community room and tie it back to the landscape. The other thing that you'll notice in this elevation is a change in the corner condition. Those windows used to be regular windows and consistent with the rest of the elevation of that mass. And now we've created like a ribbon window condition, which calls attention to itself a little bit better. We're standing in the Muse looking at the east elevation, and maybe I'll start at the left-hand corner where you see the return of that corner condition at the upper windows. We've also addressed the height change and started to descend in terms of awnings and continue that stepping down rhythm as we're navigating that grade change. And I thought this was a nice recommendation that we got to look at a corner condition, make it special, and I think it actually improved it. So, you know, great comment there.
We looked at more expressive corners, but it started to make the project cheesy looking. Because there's already so many different masses that then to add bays and things, it I don't know, it got very disappointing. So our corner moves are there, but they're not in your face. Just to be very clear about that.
And then we're suggesting some kind of art moment at also the base of the community building volume, just to acknowledge its, publicness and welcoming.
Because I know the muse might come back in our conversation, I think it's important to understand that these private 6-foot deep patios that are in front of these units are at the same level as those walkways to the doors, and so they start with as a low curb and almost a kind of seat wall height on the downside. And so that's the cross section and how we're dealing with feathering from a 4.5% slope into each of those doorways along the muse.
And then this is a rendering looking back at the Civic Plaza, where you can see some of the changes that we incorporated with the awnings cascading down, the material palette that was preferred for building B, which we can go into after the next section. So building B had less comments. The option 3 material palette was preferred, as well as the massing for that same option. You asked us to look at reducing the overall expression of the terracotta along the muse, so we'll show you what that looks like. And then we showed you 3 options for the Sewell Street elevation along building B, and you gave us a reading of which one was preferred. So just walk you through those changes. Again, looking back at building B, I think the first thing we're going to hone in on is the elevation of the muse, looking back at that terracotta volume. Oh, sorry, skipped a slide. This actually is the view of along Broadway, where we're looking at building B. You could see the light tone volume closest to the Civic Plaza. In the adjacent massing, you're seeing the entrance to building B underneath that bay window. There is a corner, window treatment that you're seeing here at the bottom of the slope, along with the drive and a storefront curving moment to bring attention. And the one thing I should highlight in that rendering, because we just have it up, Tim, is building A. You can see the revised massing with that upper floor setback.
Just a quick comment, which is, we think this is going to be very successful because you see the other pre-war apartment buildings up the hill as a kind of almost kind of natural progression. And you'll remember that the plan dimension of those chunks are very close to the plan dimension of those other apartment buildings as you get further up the hill. So we were very careful to have the breakdown of the scale match generally the mass of those volumes.
Yeah, and one thing just to
Mimi,
note.
can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
the just about the brick? You are using full dimension architectural brick, correct? Not
That's correct.
within phase brick. Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, just while you're on this image, if you can go back to just the street rendering, Broadway street rendering, is that there's a transition in color between the piers at the base and the upper floors of the building? Is that what's being, those are both brick, but just 2 different colors?
Yes. We went back and forth on that just an hour ago. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I just wanted to also point out, I'm happy to ask any other questions, but I'm just going to shift back to the massing. We intentionally changed the step back of the building so that to break down the mass. So you'll see that the building closest to us in the perspective has the step back at the 5th floor, while the volume next to it has a step back at the 6th floor. And again, we're just trying to create a little bit of variety and break down the mass.
4th and 5th, maybe.
Yeah. To
Don't want to get
Tim's
misquoted. Yeah.
where the color of brick joins, is it possible to at least sort of do a, I'm going to call it a cornice
Detail.
or a slight projection on the header of the dark base brick so that it's not coplanar?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
those details, we're going to have our eye on those details across the entire project. But absolutely, it might be where those bricks are rotated, so you get a kind of diagonal shadow or something, or the
It's like,
bricks are pushed
you know,
back a little bit, right?
relief, exactly. I think a change in plane. But I think that's a very good comment. All right, so the elevation of the Muse, I think this actually was great to look at. We had a 2-story expression of the town, the entries to the units along the Muse. We reduced that to 1 story. I think it actually improves this elevation quite a bit, but we kept that 2-story reading at the retail space. And so that change in scale is very similar to what's happening across the Muse. So we think this was a great idea. And then lastly, just reminding you what the Sewell Street elevation looks like. We decided, or the preference was to go with 1 singular expression across the whole volume. So you'll see on the next slide what that elevation looks like.
And to remind the commissioners, these are back doors to units that, unlike the Muse units, these units have a corridor front door, and these are back doors here. One of the other things that was suggested in the last meeting was to distinguish the base a little bit more than it was in the earlier versions. The last piece of this is there are 2 things that we've discussed with you that require a waiver. And so if possible, we'd like to get your endorsement for them as part of the larger rationale we have to put together for the planning board and the ZBA. One is that in this case, and in this case, we have a step back higher than what is allowed or suggested in, the MR6, the M6 zone. I'm sorry, I'm getting my cities mixed up and I forget what the letter is, but, and the other is that there's a requirement that horizontal divisions can't jump around on a facade, but because of the rising plane and other urban design strategies where we want to raise and lower those datums because we want to drop down to the scale of the Muse, we'd like your endorsement that keeping a single horizontal all the way around would be deadly and not.
Well, it's
not
really
so
problematic when we have such a grade change. There is no one single height that really works for 12 feet of grade change.
Right, and so this stepping up also has to do that this is a point where we have to step up anyway to get back to a retail space that's tall enough. And so we thought that then playing that game to step back down to the Muse was a nice urban design strategy, as Mimi discussed a couple of elevations back. So those are 2, if you're comfortable with that, 2 things we'd like you to support if possible. And then the waivers that we're making a case for with the planning board and the ZBA will be a little bit shorter. So that's the end of our presentation.
Just starting at the end, I would endorse both of those waivers. I think it makes for better buildings, a better overall project, better relationship to the context. So I think for these buildings on this specific site, I would endorse those. Just to clarify, these are, when you say waiver, this is not a variance from the requirements, but this is I guess
It
this
is
is a
literal,
process.
it is, Emily can probably explain this better than I can, but basically it is not a variance because it is a comprehensive permit. Everything is reviewed at the same time. So waivers just basically identify where they are not complying. It sort of functions as a variance in the most simplest terms without having to meet the 3 prescriptive state level criteria.
There are also variances that are being pursued for the project related to story heights and other things that I assume have also to do with the grading of the site.
Yeah,
changing across the
Tim,
property.
the biggest one, which we haven't presented to you, it would take 6 months to explain it to you, is that because of the changing grade, the required minimum floor to floor height is a kind of changing target, which partly generated the need to do this, but we're compliant. I can't remember what the number is. Is it 18 feet? I can't even remember.
Yes.
Yes.
18 feet.
We're at 18 feet here. It's not 18 for this little section here. We exceed 18 feet here. We're 18 feet, I think, for all of this frontage, but we're asking for a variance or a waiver where we have residential spaces on the ground floor where we're in some cases 12, but other cases we are hitting the 18. So it's a complicated math problem that we presented in detail at a neighborhood meeting and a couple of other meetings earlier in the process. And those issues. What's that?
I won't bog this meeting down with that.
Okay.
But thank you.
If you're interested personally, you can reach out to me, Tim. I can walk you through the.
Have at it, you two. I agree with Tim about the waivers. I totally support them, and I'm really pleased to see. You know, we were just talking about changes and putting them together. You know, suggestions, and I appreciate that. I feel like they have, in large part, improved the whole complex or the whole block, and so, you know, I think that luckily the conversation and the suggestions that we made, and as they got in the ways that you incorporated them, I think are really successful. I have one quick question and then one comment. So the two, I just realized now that there's a central entry to building B, which is off of Broadway, correct? You know, off of the street. And then building A, it's off of Temple.
Right, but both of those buildings have a courtyard entry where you can sneak into.
Yeah.
Secondary.
Exactly. So your drop off and all that. And so just to add to some of Andrew's comments, I think the streetscapes need to acknowledge those areas. I mean, we're so we're not using Ubers as much as we were, but you know, we still need curb and need to be thoughtful about those entries as the streetscape is developed. That was one. And then the other thing is the Muse. And, you know, looking at the section of it, so I think the architecture, I'm really pleased with the terracotta building. You know, the other side on building A that was already stepping, but I think the terracotta now is really nicely scaled. I'm sort of looking at the section. I'm surprised at the landscape and I guess I imagined a space that was more compressive and the landscape was denser and provided a little more privacy for the units. You know, it feels very sparse actually on both sides. And I think I'd be curious.
Maybe Deborah, we should bring up the plan because what the trees that you see here have trees on the opposite side of the Muse, but staggered. And so because of dimensional reasons, it's because David and his team wanted the trees to have enough space. You know, where there's a void on this side, there's a tree on the opposite side. And so maybe after we go through the comments of what we have here, we can go back to the plan.
Yeah,
and I'll say we were trying to be a little bit light with the trees because, you know, we didn't want to hide any of the architecture behind. And David and his team really didn't participate in the rendering of the landscape, so we might not have done it as well as he would have intended or has envisioned. So
Yes,
take that
and
with
so
a
it
pencil.
would be nice to return to that, because I think the success of it is going to be in large part the landscape and giving that, you know, sort of a threshold between the public, you know, an active path and front doors. And you know, and just, you know, looking at this, it's denser. The landscape feels denser in the Pocket Plaza than, you know, along the Muse. And I think it'd be really wonderful to come through a very intimate and compressed space. So those are my comments.
This is David with Future Green. I'm sorry to interject, but I think that's a great comment. And I think we've tried to represent that in some of our other imagery. I think, you know, there is a compressed space there, but I think we can get a fair amount of volume out of the plants, even in those kind of tight slivers between some of those private spaces and the publicly accessible path. Good point. Thank you.
As a note moving forward, it might be worth, do you have a section that sort of cuts through the Muse, sort of, so, because it might help the ZBA also to sort of see the distance between the buildings and what is actually happening there.
I think that's a good comment. I think it's a good comment, and I think there's a couple of sections I think that we need to do that are kind of localized sections. The other is through the path from Temple to Sewell Park. You know, I think we need to do a section 2 of that back kind of patio area along the Sewell property line, because we've put some time into those more intimate spaces, and I think there's been some care there too. So I think cross sections that maybe run all the way around the project would be useful.
I agree with Deborah. I appreciate how you responded to the comments from the last meeting, the refinements, the improvements. I think really throughout everything you described. I like the building corners, the really simple refinement to them. It needs to be a big wow moment. It's a subtle refinement. It relates the buildings to what's around it. A couple comments on building, just as you were going around the buildings that I wrote down. So on building A, one, seeing the perspective from the corner of Broadway and Temple is interesting. I hadn't really realized how prominent the upper 2 stories of the Temple Street facing building are. I think one is just kind of highlighting that, the importance of that as the detailing is developed. But also one thing that kind of struck me is the window sizes. The Temple's facing facade are very small, something that can be associated with affordable housing, small windows. And they seem smaller than on the lower stories. So just something, you know, maybe that could benefit from another look too. You know, you're up against the passive house requirements and everything.
Mm-hmm. I think we could expand. We could do some treatments that expand the sense of a void there instead of just having them be simple punches in the cladding. That those 2-story, you know, the zoning required 2-story penthouses on top of 4-story buildings in general is kind of a weird proportion, and so.
I know it's one that we've been really struggling with. That proportion is a little bit odd. So, but I hear you. And I do think we have opportunities to increase the width of the windows. We were just being pretty pure. You know, bedrooms get the smaller window, the living room get the wider one. You can kind of see that stacking in the corner. But we can look at that and see if we can get more window. And I think you're right, Tim, a little bit more detail.
Yeah. I mean, what we like about this image is it looks like a little piece of urbanism that happened almost organically, you know, so we like its orchestrated ad hocness or something. I don't know what the right expression would be. That's what the success of the zoning code, Sarah.
We always joke that you can't regulate incidentalism.
I think you did.
We tried.
stated opportunity. At the base of the community room, again, I think the ideas of integrating art into that, that's a good one. I guess I would just encourage you to think of it as something integral to the facade, not just something that's applied. I think we've seen a couple locations in the city where people have said, taken a blank wall, said it's going to be the art wall, and put up a piece of painted plywood or something. So I think if it doesn't become something that is just applied there, but is something that's really integral to that, it will be more successful. Along Broadway, I'm wondering just if there is a location that has been determined for that bus stop that is against the building, if that's something that's still in discussion.
I can point with my cursor, but again, it's a little bit, we have a mobility meeting in the middle of October to kind of sort that out, but I can point with my cursor about where we're thinking, and it's not showing here, but pretty much in the, on one side or the other of this bay, close to those stairs down, but not blocking them, just because of all the access points. So somewhere here. And the question is that a separate piece of MBTA street furniture closer to the curb, or do we build it into the building itself and have a little canopy or something? And that gets into jurisdictional issues and complicated questions about what the MBTA would be comfortable with too. So
yeah, okay. And I guess my last comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I guess my last comment is something that I mentioned last time as well. I know that you described the challenges of, particularly for a building that's all predominantly affordable housing, providing balconies for residents. I guess as the design continues to develop, I would just, one of our recommendations is if there is the opportunity to incorporate exterior outdoor space for individual units, that would be a recommendation.
Yeah, we discussed that with Beacon Communities, half of the partnership, and it's a little bit challenging even in terms of DHCD review and resource allocation, but we'd love to have a few, even if they're kind of punctuations and things, to emphasize a certain view corridor or to provide some relief. So we'll continue exploring that.
All right, are there any more questions or comments, or are we ready to take a vote?
One comment on building B, just one. It's just about the threshold between the civic space, the pocket plot, yeah, exactly, that and the courtyard there.
What we're doing is we're undercutting the building here and here to create a kind of interesting shaped figure that provides glimpses in, and because of their perspective is slightly warped and views out. But it's meant to be just a kind of space that you glimpse into. Is not meant to be we didn't want it to compete with the Muse as the public path. But we're comfortable with it from a kind of building adjacency design standpoint, and think in some ways it's kind of cool. I can go to the plan maybe to have to go to the very beginning here. You can see that there's a cut back here. And that's an alignment with, this is the secondary entrance to building B. It's up at the grade of the Civic Plaza. there's a 5-foot grade change between the Civic Plaza and the courtyard. And then as part of that lobby experience, it drops down to the grade of the courtyard. And that's in alignment with the secondary access point to building A. There's a kind of slot of space that connects those two. So there are interesting perspective views through that bay window from in the courtyard space. Let's call
Tim,
them.
if you go back to the rendering, you could show where the architecture is back, it's scaled down to a 1-story entry or a reading that drops. You need the perspective of the.
Which building am I going to?
You're
The end
going
of
to
this
the
one?
perspective of there. You can see where the entry and the material drops down right at that inside corner that we were focused on.
Yeah, this steps down
Yeah,
here.
that steps
Then
down,
this-
and the secondary entrance also steps down. Just
right,
to
here and here.
just to start to bring down the scale, because it is a moment where the buildings come together.
And then these step back up to kind of open up this corner and this corner. So there's a kind of composition that goes from that tight spot and kind of steps back up.
So the Civic Plaza is 5 feet above the residential courtyard.
Yes.
You think it's okay that people in the plaza will be able to stand at that edge and look down?
Yeah, we think that's cool. Yeah. And we're exploring. It's not. We haven't fully figured out yet a mural or something on the opposite wall that you would get a glimpse of through that slot of space, a little bit like that discussion about the mural wall in Building A. So we like the idea that those larger mural walls would be more the kinds of a kind of sense of discovery of those views you get on an alley, let's say, and not have those murals out at the public realm, but seem more appropriate buried back in the block. And I can go to the axon and kind of point out, that's the one we talked about last time. Let me go to the axon. It might be easier to see. Yeah, so it's on this wall back here.
Okay.
And then we're proposing one here. So those seem like really interesting places to like look between buildings and see some partial graphic or a flash of color.
All right. So let me, I need to click for a second to make sure I am covering all the votes. There we are. Okay. So as we have the materials and the massing options, we need to vote on the, we need a building A vote. We need a building B vote. Both of them have to vote on whether the design guidelines have been met. And then what additional guidelines we want to add. So are there any changes or further comments that you have other than, I mean, everything I heard and what I took notes on was very positive with the changes that they have incorporated from the last time. So I'm not sure I'm hearing anything that needs to be added from the facade or the materiality standpoint. Is that correct?
So I guess I would motion that the design guidelines have been met. and then we can talk through additional design guidance. Is that right?
Okay, all right, and let's do them one at a time. Building, we're talking about building A
Yes.
for clarity right now. So Tim is motioning that the guidelines have been met on building A. Do I have a second? All right, roll call vote. Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
Sherry Ryan,
Yes.
and Tim Talon.
Yes.
All right, building A, additional comments. I have, going through my notes, that the building A, especially on the window sizes and spacing on the 5th and 6th floor, need to be increased or articulated in more detail.
Facing Temple Street.
Right, okay, yep. And horizontal data. I think that's actually all I have on building A.
Just add,
Other than I think it's worth noting that the art at the community room should be integral rather than applied. And Tim,
Just a
sorry,
quick-
what were you going to add?
A quick question, because we're asking for the waiver or variance for the step backs, that isn't also, it need to be conditioned that is part of, that it meets the guidelines, it actually doesn't because but we recommend this waiver. I'm just wondering how that's handled.
I want to handle the waivers as a separate vote for
Got it.
right now.
Got it.
So I think that can be, because we're supportive of the architecture, so I want to make sure that gets recorded. And then the waivers become the technicality.
I guess the last one would just be that we would be supportive of further refinements to integrate balconies if feasible.
I thought that was building B. Is that building A? Sorry.
That's
Yep,
building
you're right. Okay, explore balconies. Yes. Thank you. I got my buildings confused. All right, so larger windows on 5th and 6th, especially facing Temple Street. And then art at the community room being integral to the architecture rather than applied. And the exploration of balconies for individual open space amenities. All right, do we have a motion to incorporate those methods of?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Deborah, second.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Roll call vote. Deborah,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So let's move on to building B. Do we have a motion to say that the design guidelines have been met for building B?
So moved.
Moved by Deborah. Do I hear a second? I didn't hear it, but I saw Sherry's eyebrows.
I was sort of challenging Tim.
All right, roll call vote. Tim,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
and Deborah.
Yes.
All right, and for building B, additional design advice. The I guess this is, I guess the Muse is applicable to both buildings, but we had talked about the landscape could perhaps be richer to make that the Muse space feel more compressed. Do we want to add that as a additional design note?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great. And I don't know what tree species or even if that's been decided yet, but like a Gladitsia or something that would be a translucent canopy that still have volume, I think would sort of check all the boxes there.
Okay. I am literally writing that down because I do not know how to translate that into plant speak. All right. Was there anything else for building B? All right, so that's just Muse and translucent canopy trees with volume. All right, do I have a motion to incorporate that comment?
So moved.
Motion by Deborah, second.
Second.
Second by Sherry, roll call vote. Tim?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
All right, all in favor. Then the final vote that we need to take is on the waivers. So Tim Love, I'm going to ask if you can actually bring the waiver slide up again.
Yes, I can do that. But my screens are all over the place. Give me a second. I had to slide it back and hang on. Let's do this. Let's pull it up first. Okay, let me share.
I mean, what I have in my notes, I just want to make sure that we're getting right. So the one waiver is to.
Can you see this?
Yes. The step back at the 5th story.
This is for both.
Broadway.
This is for both buildings A and B.
Right.
It's here on building A, and it's here and here on building B.
All right. Emily, how do you want us to do this? Would you like for the record to have a vote for each one separately?
Yes, and it would be helpful if they referred to not just the language, but also the zoning ordinance sections. Although if that's implied, if that's something that's reviewed, we can put that in.
I think whoops, I changed. We have them here.
Yep, okay.
Support a waiver from Somerville zoning ordinance section 2.4.4.a.x 4.4.8.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Tim, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Tim?
Yes.
Deborah? Sherry?
Yes.
All right, and so the other waiver is that the horizontal divisions may not shift up or down across the width of the facade. So do I have a motion to approve a waiver for 4.4.13.e?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, motion by Tim, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Tim,
Yes.
Deborah,
yes.
and Sherry.
Yes.
All right, all in favor of supporting the waivers. Then I think that's our final vote for this evening.
So there's two additional items I'd like to bring up, additional guidance to the zoning board of appeals in this case. One is something we talked about earlier. I'd just like to make a motion to note for the record that streetscapes were not presented or reviewed by the design commission.
Okay. All right.
I
so that's-
apologize. I apologize. Can you clarify? I think I just didn't miss that a little bit. My computer audio is not great. Just want to make sure I have it for the record.
So this is additional guidance for the zoning board of appeals. Just making a motion to note that streetscapes were not presented or reviewed by the Urban Design Commission.
Yeah. Second. Did you make a motion?
Yes, he did.
Second.
So we have a motion by Tim, second by Deborah. Roll call vote. Tim,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
and Deborah. Sorry, I always call the roll call vote by the order I see you on my screen. So sorry if that confuses you by missing, by me changing the order. I just realized I did that.
Right. Courtney always called me last and my feelings were getting hurt. So I appreciate you mixing it up.
I'm sorry. I go by a list.
I'm always joking.
It doesn't matter on the record as long as everyone is said.
All
The
right.
second thing I wanted to bring up, and this is really a question to Deborah and Sherry as commissioners about how you want to approach this. I went back in my notes and looked at, we've discussed this project at a couple of meetings now. I think you had a really good discussion, and I'm really excited to see this go forward in its current form. At our first meeting, one of the things we spent maybe the majority of the meeting talking about, Frank focused a lot on this, was parking, which I think is pretty integral issue to the feasibility and the overall urban design of this project. It's 288 units. There are no on-site parking spaces. There's zero. One of the things that was noted was it was expected that I think up to 50% of the residents may use existing on-street parking spaces and get permits to do that. So I think that has pretty broad urban design implications. 144 parking spaces is 23,000 square feet. That's more than both civic spaces combined. It's a lot of space. And I think could have, I think it's in conflict with some of the city's other goals, everything from Vision Zero to thinking about how we use our street as public space if we are allocating that much on-street space parking. And I think it also has significant impacts for neighbors as well. So I am 100% in favor of reducing parking. I've lived in Somerville for almost 20 years without a car. It's certainly possible to do. But I think, and I know it wasn't the focus of our review, but I haven't seen it really demonstrated that the steps are being taken by this project to make it feasible for residents to live without a car. And we talked about a few of those at different meetings, making sure there's neighborhoods serving retail for residents, things like that. So I guess I was going to suggest that we make a motion to, one, not support the idea of 144 households parking on the adjacent streets as the solution to parking, and recommend that if no on-site parking is going to be provided, that a very robust residential transit demand management plan be put into place for this project. I think that could include everything from providing, a few spaces for dedicated car share. I know that's provided as condo amenities in some locations where there are, we're not parking, maybe it's 3 cars per building or something, but they are provided by the building for residents' use when they need that. Dedicated, really thinking closely about dedicated drop-off and pickup spaces for Uber and Lyft, because everyone's going to use them if they don't own a car. It's going to really affect the character of the place. We talked about the retail strategy focused on providing goods and services targeted towards residents, specifically a commitment to locate a grocery store or convenience store on the site. Potentially locating childcare on site, the thing that people drive to get to.
And I think, I would add bike, really convenient bike accommodation.
Yes. Yeah, and that's that too, and it could be a blue bike station on site too. But I think, we often see these transit demand management plans for commercial buildings. I'm not sure I've ever really seen one focused on making it possible for residents not to need to own a car. But I think that's the task for this project, to make what is a really exciting project and future place really feasible.
Emily, just as a clarification, so for process, they still have to provide the mobility management plan, the transportation impact study, and a transportation access plan.
Correct.
So a lot of these will be required as part of the MMP.
Yes, and to interject, I would like to note that board members are welcome and encouraged to attend the zoning board meetings and provide comments independently as we've received these documents. We're in constant communication with the applicant, discussing what is necessary to address the concerns, mobility needs. There's extensive bicycle parking actually presented on site within the buildings. Not to get off topic, but there's so much in terms of mobility that's being discussed right now, and I think Tim and Mimi and potentially Robert could also speak to the fact that we're really working on finalizing what needs to be submitted as part of the comprehensive permit application, and there will be extensive information as part of that application that will be made available to members of the public once it's submitted and it's
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of an overview. I mean, it's getting late here, but we have our third meeting coming up on October 12th with Brad Rawson and team. This has been a highly collaborative process with them about how we navigate the issues that you brought up, Tim. One of the advantages of no subsurface garage is that we've got all of the bicycle parking at grade, visible through shop fronts. One at the back of the limited parking we're still providing for the liquor store, and the other visible from Grant Street across that slot of space and up the grade there. And I think there's been a lot of public and community process through the CAC, the SRA, and community meetings around the parking issue. VHB was commissioned to do a kind of existing street parking utilization scheme that was presented in a couple of venues over the last month, and that was scoped, and the analysis was scoped in collaboration with the city team. So just want to let you know that the mobility aspects of this project have gotten at least as much scrutiny as the urban design issues over the last couple of meetings we've had here. But agree generally with your perspective on this. One issue is that there has to be the provision for some way for some percentage of the tenants to access parking, or the developer can't get financing. And so that's a little bit the sticking point. It's a financing issue really more than it is a kind of market issue. The kind of underwriting for the project requires access to a certain amount of parking.
All right, then can I make a recommendation? Tim, would you like to make a motion that the Urban Design Commission report recommends that the mobility management plan be aggressive to balance the reduced parking by providing more features to support bicycling and transit use?
So yeah, I think that sounds good. I guess two specific things which could change the plan that we reviewed would be dedicated spaces for rideshare pickup and on-site car share spaces. So I'm wondering if you specifically want to address a recommendation on those. And then the retail strategy focusing on providing goods and services targeted towards residents. I'd like to be specific about that as well.
Okay. All right. So
Does that sound, Sherry and Deborah, does that sound good?
Yeah, just to be clear, there are no parking spaces on site. The parking spaces that are shown along the back of the liquor store are ongoing negotiation that are happening with the abutting property owner. So we'd have to park the car share in the Civic Plaza.
Well, and I guess that's why I'm saying that I'm not sure how viable is that really? They have 0 car share parking spaces. I mean, it is something that as these negotiations with mobility and planning and then get to the zoning board of appeals and the public hearing, as all that process takes place, it's something that could change. It's going to impact, it could impact the layout of the buildings, it could mean losing a unit, it could mean very different things.
Let's include it as a recommendation, but know that this is something that mobility will be the ultimate, well, mobility and engineering. And it very well could be possible. I know in other cities, car shares happen on street spaces. So maybe that's the solution here. Okay, so I think we have a motion that the MMP be aggressive to enhance transit and bicycles, that the retail program be very much tailored for residents and neighborhood uses, and that the ride share and car share spaces be addressed.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion.
Not only enable transit and bicycle use, but really enable residents to focus on enabling residents to live without a car.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right, so that's Tim's motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I'm trying to understand this. I completely conceptually agree, but I don't know what power we have over this. I mean, you know, is this a part of our jurisdiction to impose anything? You know, or is this suggestion? I guess I missed the beginning of the motion.
I see this as merely, it's a recommendation to the zoning board that these things be considered, because it, you know, sort of it does affect the public realm, even though it's not something that we as a commission vote on.
Okay. Yeah, then I second it then.
I think Sherry beat you to it. But
Okay.
you can have the first vote in the roll call. Deborah.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Is that the last one? Or Tim, do you want to keep going?
No, I'm done. Sorry, everyone.
All right, then we actually do need one more motion. Oh, Emily, keep me on track.
Just wanted to note, we skipped right to the civic spaces. We did not address the continuance of the minutes. So that would be one very quick administrative thing to do.
All right. Can I get a motion that we postpone voting on the minutes until next time?
So moved.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's somewhere between Sherry and Deborah. And roll call vote, Deborah.
Yes. And did we receive those minutes? I didn't think they were a part of the package. Okay.
That was a part of the reason why we would like to continue it, because I was not certain which minutes, which versions of the minutes should have been forwarded.
Okay. So yes.
We can clear that up with Andrew next time. So, all right. So I've got a motion by Sherry, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Deborah.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
And Tim.
Yes.
Okay. Now, can I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Okay. Roll call vote. Tim.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
And Deborah.
Yes.
All right, the meeting is adjourned at 8:23 p.m. Thank you all, and well done, UTeal and everyone.
Good job, you guys.
Yeah, thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Your comments over the last, I guess, 2 meetings have made the project better, so we really appreciate it.
And Tim, I know you think you weren't on video tonight, but we saw the back of your head behind Mimi, so we know.
Mimi, shake your head.
Well, I'm not on video now. I could, but
I will
think
say
we're all
that
tired.
I will say with great confidence, the Loves are the last ones in the office.
I was just gonna say it's a date night for the Loves.
We're gonna turn off the lights and get the hell out of here.
Thanks, guys.
All
Okay.
right.
Well,
Thanks.
good night, all. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.